Northwest of Whistle are some of the tallest surviving parts of Hadrian's Wall. The wall marches west, rolling up and down along the crest of the Whin Sill escarpment, with amazing views, until it just ends, and the modern dry stone wall stops you going over the edge of a sheer rock face. Below you is a large gaping hole where the wall and the Whin Sill once were, Walltown Quarry. Walltown Quarry was once one of the biggest whinstone quarries in the whole of Northumberland. It opened in 1876 and closed 100 years later in 1976. It's a country park now, but there are more than enough clues here to tell its full history. We'll start on the other side of the quarry, at the visitor centre beside the car park and bus stop, and work our way around. There used to be a geology guide for Walltown, the Hard Rock Trail. We'll be using a couple of their stops, but unfortunately the trail guide is no longer available. To our left is a big face of whinstone, and rounding a corner and looking over the pond, you suddenly begin to appreciate just how huge this quarry once was. It was deep too. It went 30 metres below current ground surface. Northwest of the pond is a very small crag of whinstone. Everything around it has been quarried away. One of the great things about Walltown Quarry for geologists is that you get to see the rocks that the Whin Sill was injected into. Lying beneath the whinstone, on a sloping surface, is a sandy limestone with many fossil shells in it. They look a bit like cockles, but they are an extinct species of carboniferous brachipod called spiriferids that lived in a warm coral sea 320 million years ago. Someone's created a large model of one for the old trail. Turning a very large old quarry, essentially a big hole, into a country park with trees and meadows was a challenge. Perhaps made more difficult because many thousands of tons of glacial clay and stones, excavated from the line of the new A69 route at Green Head, was used to infill much of the quarry, and was also spread across the rest of the site. Glacial clay is not the best material for planting trees and plants in, especially when it is being compacted by heavy machinery. But there is one small geological positive. Within the glacial clay were boulders of granite, erratics carried south and east by the ice sheet 20,000 years ago. Some have been thoughtfully left beside the footpath. The old quarry face in whinstone appears above and through the trees. It looks tall enough, but the full thickness of the Whin Sill reaches over 40 metres here. Whinstone is extremely hard, and in order to quarry it, the men had to drill holes, fill them with explosives, and blast the rock into chunks. In the early days, they would use a heavy sledgehammer to break up those chunks, shaping some, knocking up it's called, into sets for streets or curbstones. Much of the rock was broken into small pieces to make tarmacadam for roads, including bits of the M6 and runways. In later years, some of the hard shaping and crushing work was done by machines, but explosives were still needed to split the stone away from the quarry face. Whinstone doesn't break into nice rectangular pieces like sandstone. One of the reasons the Romans used sandstone for the faces of their wall, not whinstone. Whinstone was only used in the rubble core of the wall. But just what is the Whin Sill, and how did it get here? Geologists call this rock a dolerite. That's a type of igneous rock, one that was once molten and then cooled, and the minerals in it crystallized and became solid. The vertical joints and cracks, and the columns of the rock, are the result of that cooling and contraction. Just like the Giant's Causeway, but not quite as perfect. The Whin Sill started out in a huge chamber of molten magma, deep underground. 295 million years ago, that molten rock forced its way upwards, and then sideways in between layers of sandstone, limestone and shale. When our part of the world was being stressed by movements in the Earth's crust, these rocks were broken and dislocated by geological faults. Then over millions of years the rocks were worn down by erosion, until they became the landscape we are all familiar with, one in which harder rocks stand proud, making the bold escarpment that Hadrian chose as a great place to build his wall. It's time to go see the wall, but on our way there, in the field just east of the gate out of the quarry, are a series of small, scruffy hollows. These are old quarries too, but for limestone, and you can just see the little outcrops of limestone that sit above the Whin Sill. Climb northwest up the slope. It's worth it. You get to see that wonderful section of Hadrian's Wall, panoramic views north, and gaze into an old quarry slowly being reclaimed by nature, with a little help from us. Walltown Quarry closed in 1976, and in the years that followed there was a debate, not the first in its history, about what should happen to it. One idea was a Roman theme park, but that was considered to cost too much. The eventual decision was the country park within the national park that you see today. Walltown Quarry, like most quarries, has often been controversial. Hardly surprising when it lies on the line of Hadrian's Wall. Attempts during World War II to extend the quarry faced an outcry, but perhaps what would surprise us today, or maybe not, is the reaction to those objections, questioning the worth of the Roman wall itself. I wonder if anybody then, even the most ardent antiquarian, would have guessed that the economic contribution of Hadrian's Wall tourism today would exceed the value of crushed rock from the quarry many times over. Walltown is no longer a noisy quarry. It's a peaceful country park. Times and our values have changed, but our landscape will always be a stage on which we act out the conflicts that are inherent in the use of land.